Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Soss. This is their part number 218 in the US10BL finish. Sorry, just trying to show you the box first. So it's a 218 hinge in a 10B finish that has a lacquered finish on it. And here is the hinge. Classic 218. 218 is a very common hinge used for if you have an 1 3/4 solid core door, 306A, 307, 3080, whatever width, height really. The 218 is your go-to hinge. The US 10B is oil rub bronze, but the L adds a lacquer to it. So that's going to allow this finish to stay stable rather than to be a type of a hinge that might be what would change with time. Oil rub bronze is known as a living finish, and while you don't really touch a hinge, it's when you use hardware like a push bar or a lock set that's an oil rub bronze that will wear away that oil rubbed process over the solid architectural bronze material that the hardware is made from. But when you add a lacquer to it, obviously touching it, sure, over time I suppose you would certainly fatigue the lacquer on a piece of hardware that you were making contact with, but a hinge, you never really touch a hinge. The point of the matter is this: over time you can expect that finish to stay faithful to what it looks like day one. Okay, this is since we're talking finishes, this will be available in a variety of different finishes. The least common that I've sold is the gold version. You can actually get these plated in 24 karat gold. At least we still have them listed as available in that. Unplated, you can obtain for the purposes of doing a custom finish. I've had people make these hinges a gunmetal sort of color or a blue steel sort of color, so unplated is what they started with. US 10BL, oil rubbed with a lacquer. US 14 is bright nickel, US 15 is satin nickel. You can get these in a US 19, which is a black, I believe it to be a powder coated finish. The US 26 bright chrome, US 26D satin chrome, US 3 bright brass, US 4 US 4 satin brass, US 5 antique brass. So lots of different finishes. I would imagine you could probably buy these prime coated as well, although that's not specifically listed. Speaking of other things, just quickly before we move on with this hinge in particular, a common item that we sell is the Soss 218-IT. It's the wooden template for mortising these. If you are doing a job where you are interested in having a leg up in terms of the routing of a wood door and a wood frame and aren't looking forward to laying out all the preparations for your router, simply buy the template. It's considering the amount of time that you would spend creating the template, the money is well worth it. Even, quite frankly, you were to discard it when the project was done. It's that inexpensive. It will give you the proper outline for the plate, and it will give you the guide pins to do the body as well. It will give you the proper spacing for the first hinge on the door and frame. It will give you the proper inset or hinge back set on the door and frame as well. So that's just, or perhaps you already have a template, or you like to be able to make your own template. I got it. But they do offer one, the 218IT. Speaking of templates, they also have the router guide system for a 3 or a 4 Soss hinge system, where you can purchase all those templates and the guide rails together so that you can assemble everything and literally transport it from the door, make all your route preparations, move that to the frame, make all your route preparations, and continue on. Now, the Soss 218 hinge itself, like I said earlier, this is the workhorse if you're dealing with 1 3/4 doors. There is a image below this video that shows the general dimensions of the item, and let's just touch on those now and briefly. The width of the face is their A dimension, and their diagram shows that at 1 1/8". That is indeed the case. The overall height of the plate is their C dimension, which is shown on their paperwork at 4 5/8". That is indeed the dimension as well. Also nice to know what the H dimension is, which is the overall depth of the body. You might need to know what that is in terms of how it might work with a frame that you are trying to install these on. So the H dimension, overall depth of the body, is, okay, 4 and 41, 60, I don't know, 1 and 5/8. Yeah, okay, so basically 1 5/8. The F dimension, the height of the body itself, that comes in at 2 7/16, according to them. Yes, indeed, that's correct. I like to double check them to make sure, A, that the website's correct, and A, that the manufacturer's original material doesn't contain a typo error as well. You can see the location of the screw holes. And a 218 doesn't have 2 holes for screws. It has 4 on each leaf. Screws are included. You'll get a total of 8 of these screws in a complementary finish, okay, which are 10 by 1.5 inches. Now, there is an image, forgive me, there is a link to a Soss original produced video on Soss hinges regarding installation that is below this video that would be very handy for you to review as well. It's a nice onboard in terms of approaching a first-time installation, absolutely. There is a link below this video to a document called Cut Sheet. That's the business end of getting them installed. And what I mean by that is it will show you, and if it's your first time, it might be intimidating, I suppose, but the fact of the matter is if it is your first time, simply study the dimensions that they're showing there, because that's all you have to accomplish. You can see that when the door is parallel to the face of the wall, or when the door would be open at 180 degrees, they want a 3/8 of an inch margin between the inside face of the door and the face of what you're mortising it to, the frame. So that will allow you to stage the separation correctly, knowing what it has to be. You will then take note of what the hinge back set needs to be, and you can see that they've got a 1/4 inch maximum dimension from the inside face of the door, or the frame for that matter, to where the hinge plate's going to start. So from the edge of the door to the plate is not to exceed a 1/4 inch. Okay, that and quite frankly, I would just follow that and set it to that instance, unless of course you needed to shift something around, move one dimension, but so as it doesn't exceed a 1/4 inch. The hinge is shown open at 180 degree and will certainly swing the door 180 degree, provided there's no sort of casing or other obstacle in the way. The rest of the dimensions really just show where everything is laid out, screw hole locations, etc. The minimum material thickness to install a 218 is 1 3/4, and that's why it's the go-to hinge for those 1 3/4 solid core or hollow metal doors as well. These aren't it's not unheard of to have these installed on hollow metal doors. The balance of the dimensions, certainly on the right-hand side, give you the hard dimensions of what the hinge actually is in terms of its dimensional properties. When I mortise one of these, when I approach mortising a new piece of hardware, I will have the template. I will always use my caliper, which is, in my opinion, the woodworker's most valuable tool, and I will check everything. Once you've confirmed your physical dimensions, you'll either use the template that's been manufactured based on knowing what your bit size is and knowing what your collet size is for your router. And that template, the Soss template, by the way, works with their own brand and then a Porter cable brand. And then creating the template, or if it's already manufactured, applying the template to the door and routing. If you're using their template, I would not be concerned about double checking the template to make sure that everything is correct. I would make sure that I've got the right collet and bit installed, the right nut and collet installed in the router. I would proceed with mortising the material if the router's already manufactured. If you're going to make one, then you're going to have to know what the radius is, and this radius is, looking for where this radius is. It's obviously 9/16 because you have an 1 1/8 diameter body. Okay, so you're going to need to be able to create your template or create the preparation by which you're going to go ahead and do that. I've had some people that have just quite frankly used an 1 1/8 router drill bit, a Forstner bit or something that will give them a clean cut. Make this preparation, connect the two and then drill down deep for this body. That's certainly acceptable as well. I just find a router to be a cleaner way to go about doing it. If you're doing one door and you don't want to make the investment in a template, you might fight it that way and do it by hand. I've had people do that as well. The location of these Soss hinges for installing, Soss will tell you if you're doing 2 hinges on a door, you know, top and bottom. If you're doing 3 hinges on a door, which is very common, you'll do one at the top, one at the bottom, but then that second hinge will be much closer up to the top of that hinge. They have perhaps a recommendation of 10 inches. And frankly, the link, the template, the 218-IT, if you were to search for that on our site, you'll be able to find the installation instructions regarding the template. They will show you where they want that second hinge installed. Door center line, cut that in half, and that's where that second hinge would be. Top hinge, bottom hinge. Door center line, take half of the distance, and that's where your second hinge is. The reasoning for that, and it's the few times, the very few times I've been to Europe, I've noticed, and I see European doors, say on a cruise ship, 2 hinges at the top. All the time you see that. Here in the United States, or North America, or at least in the United States, we don't see that nearly as often, hardly ever. But the truth is that 70% of the door weight's actually hanging on that top hinge. So that's why putting 2 at the top is really the way to go, and you would see that commonly in double-acting spring hinges. So location of that material, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom. If you're doing 4, you basically will follow that sort of guideline, and they're going to, you'll have your 3 spaced correctly, but then the 4th hinge would be a quarter of that dimension, half of the door center line to the second dimension, below the door center line, and it's all listed right there. So why do people like Soss hinges? Well, from my perspective, why people like them? Probably because they're concealed. They're concealed, and you don't see the hardware ever at all, and I think that makes them certainly a very elegant sort of solution. I agree with all of that. A concealed hinge is elegant. You don't see the hardware that hangs the door. The reason that I personally like them is because of the outrageous door weight that a Soss hinge can handle. There is a link below this video to a document, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page. There is a link on that page to what Soss calls their nomograph, or usage chart. And when you pull that document up, you will see that on the left-hand side, you're going to calculate your door width. You're going to put a pencil mark there. You're going to calculate your door weight, put a pencil mark there. You're going to then draw a straight line to the weight chart and then go straight across, and that line will follow all of the available hinges for your width and weight. Now, what's fantastic about the Soss hinge is that their door weight chart, the weight, it tops out at 500 pounds, way beyond a standard hinge, way beyond. It's because of these laminated pieces of steel. I read somewhere sometime many years ago, someone from Soss, or maybe someone that was part and parcel of the original design of a Soss hinge, I don't remember the facts, but the gentleman basically said, I don't care how heavy your door is, keep throwing my hinges at it, it'll hang the door. And in my experience, I found that to be true. I've had clients that have had 350-pound doors, and it's well beyond a hinge, and they don't want to put a continuous hinge on the door because it's obviously very effective to hang a door with a continuous hinge. It's just not the elegant look that they're looking for. Soss is a product that I think of immediately when you are outside of the range of a hinge, say 200 pounds. I've had people hang lead line doors, just a 1/16 of an inch lead line door on hinges, and it's terrible. It's just, client calls me back 2 years later, hey, why is my door sagging? Well, my response is, hey, remember when I said you shouldn't use hinges? So that's where Soss is going to work for you really well. Anything heavier, anything high usage, Soss is great. Now, there are some downsides for Soss, maybe not a downside, but to make you aware of, there is certainly a preparation requirement that has to be done for this. Any door that you're going to make or have made will simply cost more when you're using Soss, not only for the hardware, but the prep alone. Whether it's made at a factory, it'd be marginally more expensive. If you're making it yourself, it will certainly be more expensive with time. If it is a metal door, you're certainly going to need to have reinforcing plates manufactured, and I am all but positive Soss provides that material, a hinge reinforcing plate. Forgive me, I needed to confirm. They do indeed manufacture steel door reinforcements for Soss for the 216, the 218, and the 220. The 220 is a bigger version of this and would certainly work on 1 3/4 door as well. Those part numbers are the hinge plus SDB, Sierra Delta Bravo, SDB, 216 SDB, 218 SDB, 220 SDB. And if you're going to do a metal door and frame, just purchase those, because it's not worth your time to manufacture the plates themselves. And I'm not aware of any other source for those hinge plates in order to get them installed. So preparation time, something to take into account. Furthermore, Soss doesn't really affect anything in terms of the door net size, the bevel requirements, and lock sets, exit devices. Door closers, not, where you're going to come into a situation where you need to consider the fact that you're hanging a door on Soss is be sure that the door closer, if there is one, and certainly if there is an overhead stop, that you have ordered that hardware indicating the door is hung on the specific Soss hinge. The reasoning is this. If you imagine just a regular butt hinge, a full mortise butt hinge, the vertical axis of pivoting doesn't move. It's just a straight line, a plumb straight line. The center line of the barrel of that hinge, up and down the door. What you'll notice with a Soss hinge is this pin. The pin is going to represent the vertical axis of pivoting. Okay. What you're going to notice is that pin is not that pin moves, is what I'm trying to say. It moves in an arc. That means that the vertical axis of pivoting actually moves through the entire travel of the door, which is unusual for typical hinges. And quite frankly, to say that it doesn't move a lot is not accurate. It actually does move a lot. It moves all the way from basically the face of the hinge here, all the way to the center line of the hinge, especially if you get to 180 degrees. The point of the matter is the templating for hardware that is dependent on the geometry of how the door swings needs to be taken into account when that material is manufactured, or the templating is included and supplied to you for installation purposes. The bottom line is when you order that hardware, include that information on your order that the door is hung on a Soss X hinge, and it needs to be manufactured and templated correctly. That hardware generally costs more money as well, at least perhaps from an engineering perspective. Now, when you take those downsides, prep, cost, additional cost for other hardware into account, and compare them against what I consider the advantages: concealed hinge, great weight, elegant sort of solution. You'll have to decide if Soss is a good option for you. But as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely worth taking a look at, because hinges do fatigue with time. Regular butt hinges simply do. Even if it's a door well within the range of a common hinge installation, you'll always, if you go into a restaurant and you go into the bathroom and then you exit that bathroom, take notice of that top hinge and look at the wear points between the knuckles on that hinge, and then take a look at the bottom hinge, and you'll see how that top hinge has visually different wear marks or wear pattern compared to the bottom hinge. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can view not only all of the Soss products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, a link to that nomograph mentioned earlier, but in that area as well, several other valuable resources from Soss, and then finally their full product catalog. The Soss is going to be able to help you with that full line of concealed hinges, everything from the big 220 They also make a closer version of this as well, where there's a large spring assembly that's attached to the backside, so that when the hinge is opened, it forces the spring to contract, and then obviously when the door is released, the spring wants to expand and will pull the door closed. They have that those concealed door closers as well, and they're also going to help you with those hinges, from tiny little barrel hinges for very thin material all the way up to those big, the 220 hinge. And then they have a line of magnetic door holders as well, which is interesting if you take a look at that in terms of keeping a door held open. And then they have a relatively new line of hardware called their Ultra Latch, some latching passage material. That link to the catalog also gives a brief Soss company history, which I find interesting, applications for the material, and then further down in the catalog they'll show their new Ultra Latches, some deadbolt material that's applied there for reference, and then it gets into their hinges, and then after that their ancillary material like their templates and the associated items as they pertain to supporting the hinge itself, and then at the very end some other hardware like that magnetic door holder that I had mentioned earlier, along with the quadrant hinges there as well. If you have any questions on the Soss 218 concealed or invisible hinge in a 10BL finish or any other Soss product, please feel free to reach out to us.